and Accountability Plan, LCAP. It's our second reading, and I didn't know, Superintendent Martin, you can introduce.
Thank you, President Foster. So this is the public hearing. It's a second reading of our LCAP, and we had received significant feedback since the public hearing opened at the previous board meeting. Not only feedback from the board from the last meeting, but from the community members through our engagement process. So what we're doing tonight in the second reading, one of the points of feedback that came specifically from you as trustees was that you wanted our LCAP to tell more of the story. I will say that the public hearing, there are statutory requirements about what we put forward in the document and what needs to be posted and how long it's posted and how the public hearing goes. So we took care of that requirement at the first public hearing. So tonight we want to tell more of the story, and we want to lift out some of the strategies to bring the LCAP alive, because we believe in what we're doing. We believe in the engagement process that we've had and what students can look forward to. Students, parents, teachers can be looking forward to in the second year of the implementation of the LCAP. So I'll have the speakers come up to present parts of the LCAP this evening and make it come alive. You can let us know how we're doing in bringing out some of the strategies. But before I bring up several of our staff members to be a part of the presentation, I want to specifically focus on the stakeholder feedback and some of the changes that were made. There were 4 themes to the feedback that we received. First of all, process and timeline. We got lots of significant feedback on the process and the timeline that we used, and we agreed with all of the feedback on that and want to incorporate what we've learned. We got significant feedback on the metrics, on actions and services, and then on the LCAP formatting and additional resources. So let me give you some examples of changes that were made in this period where we had between the first reading and the second reading. So in terms of process and timeline, based on the feedback that we heard from many of our stakeholders, they wanted additional time to review the LCAP. And so that's something that we want to be able to incorporate next year. Not as an excuse, but this year there was an annual update. It's the first year, so we had the LCAP document, and then we also had to produce an annual update. That's a first-time document, and managing what that new tool looked like, what the annual update looks like, we don't anticipate it will be as difficult next year because it's an annual update. It's not a first time producing that document. It took longer to develop, which is, like I said, not an excuse, but we don't expect significant changes to these templates, although we would like to make them as user-friendly as possible. We can add more additional time, we believe, next year. We also, in terms of process and timeline, we added, that actually came from board resolution, to make sure there's representation of all clusters on the planning team. We're adding a meeting and/or moving up the planning team meeting dates to allow more time for processing. We are planning to potentially post the draft LCAP earlier, and we are thinking if we post it earlier, it will still be in the developing stage, but that's okay. We can say developing and post it earlier for transparency. We also would like to next year provide a full-day board workshop. The LCAP last meeting, as we know, it went very late, and it was a very important topic. And we had an hour scheduled for a board meeting, and it really could be a whole day board workshop. And when we think about our LCAP next year having 6 goals, we can anticipate or envision, I would say, a full day board workshop focusing on each of the goal areas, and people that are interested in a particular goal area could come to one part of the workshop if they want to hear the whole thing. But we're thinking that we would agendize a full day meeting, board workshop on it next year. And to continue with process and timeline, we will also continue with the monthly updates, which were not a requirement. That was part of our effort to continually talk about it, not just wait for statutory requirements, but every month talk about it. So those are based on some of the feedback we heard, specific actions that we're going to take for our revisions. In the area of metrics, I wanted to clear up a couple of things because there's been some confusion about metrics, that the metrics are selected for indicators to show progress towards achieving the goals, not for each action and service. And so there's been some confusion about you want a metric for every action and service. The metrics go with the broad goal. And we've had dialogue where people wanted to know where the metric was for each service. That's not the requirement of the LCAP, but each service, per action and service, improved or increased services lead to moving that overall goal. And so that's where the metrics are. What we've done, just making sure metrics and actions are related to the goal, and the expenditures are what are related to the actions. So next to actions, you see expenditures, but metrics are related to goals. And I think that's been confused in the public. And anytime something's confused, we have to own that. We haven't clearly communicated it. We want to continue to make that more clear. There were some suggestions on the metrics that were provided, and some adjustments were made. For example, Goal 1, the feedback was to add a metric for long-term English learners, which we're doing. We know that measuring English proficiency and differentiating between those with continuous enrollment and those with interrupted enrollment, moving in and out of the district, we want to have an added metric for that, for the long-term English learners. Also for Goal 1, we added a metric for the seal of biliteracy and for the fitness gram. That would be new this year and part of the first read. And then for Goals 1 and 3, we removed the metrics related to cultural proficiency, quality teaching, leadership, professional learning continuums, as they haven't yet been developed. But we're going to add the corresponding actions to develop these metrics next year so we can put them in the LCAP. So why put something in if we didn't have a metric? We're going to develop those metrics for those in the coming year. In terms of actions and services, the feedback that we had was around Goal 5. We heard that they wanted to, stakeholder input said to include more clear actions. It wasn't as clear, and so we reviewed them and we put some changes in to clarify. So for example, under Goal 5, parent and community engagement, we add clarifying language for additional opportunities for parent leadership training to enhance meaningful engagement. We added develop and provide support resources, print, video, online, on demand for parents to support student learning on relevant topics. So we've got about 8 bullets of what we did specifically on parent community engagement to make it more concrete and specific of what we would do. One of them was collaborate with SDEA to build on and expand the home visit project. That was feedback we received from SDEA. We have a promising practice. Why not write that into the LCAP? So if we want to increase parent and community engagement, that was a really great example and a suggestion for SDA to expand the home visit program and to establish a parent engagement task force. Those are some things that we added to Goal 5. In Goal 1, support for African and Latino students, we clarified and added more specificity by talking about the development of a robust mentoring program to engage district staff, advocacy groups, and other community members that would serve as trained mentors to increase academics, social success of those students. And we added to support the expansion and development of the student advocacy groups at all secondary schools where students' cultures and identities can be explored and nurtured. That was direct feedback on specific actions for supporting African American, and Latino students under Goal 1. And then under Goal 6 for communications, we heard lots of recommendations that we wanted to see clarification for effective communications. So 4 specific suggestions on that was re-engineering the district school websites to be more user-friendly. That was added. Expanding the use of digital communications, including webpage, electronic newsletters, school messenger, etc. We added enhanced communications and information sharing between clusters, and we added collaborating with the County Office of Education and other districts to develop standard targeted messages on student support. Then in additional changes also included developing, implementing IEPs, including documentation. We wanted to see quality response to intervention, response to instruction and intervention, that all schools and site administrators and area superintendents would be involved in implementing the RTI process. That wasn't called out specifically, and people were concerned about that. Developing a program for 8th graders. We had feedback around middle school particularly, and are there enough services for middle school students? So we added to develop a program for 8th grade students to provide a personalized college and career experience that will help students identify their strengths and interests. And we clarified, edited some of the specific actions for National Science Standards and around the OLA office. And every one of these additions, changes that we made came from specific feedback that we heard. And the 4th area was around the LCAP formatting and additional resources. We added additional formatting links to the LCAP to make it easier for people to navigate. We put in headers identifying the LCAP section areas. We started to color code. We put the LCAP plan in blue, and the goals and the annual update were in green, and we started identifying what those parts were. We added live links in the LCAP section 1 to connect to the district website. Anytime anything was referenced, we made a link live. And then we put additional resources that we're creating is the 1516 LCAP in user-friendly format, the annual update in user-friendly format. We made the executive summary, the LCAP highlights, page 2. I don't know what I mean by page 2, just the LCAP highlights. And then we provided the written response from the DAC and the DLAC. And then Dr. Evans also talked about, could we have some sort of document that was really simple that the public could say, so what is going on with your LCAP? So we have a draft of it. It's not final yet, but to say San Diego Unified's LCAP means good things for students, for parents, and for teachers. And we've called out some of the key strategies. That there's a major theme to, I just went through a litany of all of the changes to show that feedback happened and we made specific changes. How can people track all those changes? But the overall message around an LCAP, if you were to categorize all that we're doing, our focus has always been on equity and excellence, but most of our investments are around building capacity. Mm-hmm. And can we have one document that just says everything that we're doing is to build capacity with our stakeholders, with our community groups, with our students, with our leaders, with our parents, that all of our investments are around capacity building, and we think that's the greatest opportunity to bring to life the investments that we'll be making in our students. Because when you invest in people, you build capacity that lasts forevermore. So mm-hmm. when a budget comes and a budget goes, and you have high times and you have low times, if you've invested in the intellectual capital of the people who serve our students, parents and community members, teachers, the entire staff, you learn something and you know that forevermore. So an overall theme, when we lifted out strategies, you can see each of the key strategies that we know will accomplish our goals for all students. Those strategies align to the key areas that we know we're going to focus on. So that's high-level summary. One more thing that we also did is added in Goal 5, we had feedback around translation and interpretation services. We added that to provide, we increased staffing and resources to the translation department to more effectively serve a wider range of language groups and needs. So that came from other feedback as well. So feedback was coming on a constant basis and we kept making revisions. But for the rest of the presentation, I'd like to call up my partners in presenting, let's bring some of these strategies alive. We have dozens of strategies, we have metrics, we have dollars associated with it, but what's actually going to happen for students next year? That's the story you want to know. So in order to do that, I'm going to call up Fabiola Bagula, Cheryl Hiblin, Vernon Moore, and I know Cheryl is bringing Ed Hidalgo and Ed Abayeta with her. I don't know when exactly you all want to come, but you can decide what, I forgot what order we're doing it in, is to bring out some of the key strategies so we can bring it to life.
So Superintendent Martin, while they're coming up, in goal 1 or 2, when we're giving the LCAP accountability updates, as we move forward with that, this is going to sound like it's not a statement, it's really a question. Okay. Or a statement disguised as a question disguised as a statement. But we're actually going to be capturing feedback from those that participate in the meetings that happen with our clusters, with the DAC and all that. And I know that in the past it has not been uniform, but that is our intention and that's what's going to happen going forward. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that.
Thanks for highlighting that, President Foster. We struggle with what's too much input and what's not enough input. And then you have all these input opportunities and then you still have stakeholders saying, but you didn't ask me. And I didn't have a chance to say anything in the process. I didn't get a chance. So in December, we started a process where the monthly LCAP updates were going out to the clusters and going out to advisory group meetings. And we at the first September and October meetings, when we pushed our presentations out to the clusters, we didn't gather feedback formally. In December, we started a process for that, and we saw that it wasn't uniform in every cluster. So we're going to improve that process because we think the structure is the right structure. We want to keep bringing it out to the community. Like I said, that's not required that we do that, but we think that that dialogue out in the community gives us that meaningful feedback on an ongoing basis of what's working, what's not working. We also think that we focus our monthly updates this year specifically on data. That data establishes baseline in the key areas that we paid attention to. I think next year, besides just highlighting data, we can highlight a strategy so that the story comes alive more as well. So, and we want to continue to refine that process so every stakeholder knows where you give input. We'll be very public about it. That one of the areas of feedback was that community members and stakeholders said, we didn't know that the cluster meeting was our chance. And they weren't going to cluster meetings, and it's not something that some stakeholders ever really attended. And if that's your chance to give your feedback, and you know, we actually believe in the cluster model. The community-based school reform approach that this board's committed to happens with cluster engagement. And so the clusters become more and more meaningful and relevant when we bring meaningful and relevant topics to discuss and engage and have conversation about. And I think people are learning that that's the structure we're going to use.
And then lastly, before the presentation, there were some comments about, when we talk about differentiated instruction, differentiated presentations recording for the LCAP, because there's LCAP 101, because not everyone knows what LCAP is still today. I know that's surprising, but that's a fact. That's what I keep on hearing. And so whether that is a video that's on our website that when you see LCAP you can click on. I hear that PTA has national, I mean not national, but PTA for the state has this great video that just really speaks to and explains it like in, as an exaggeration, but 60 seconds or something, I don't know. But I mean, ways to explain, you know, what LCAP is and why it's so important for parents and community to get engaged in that process. And I mean, I'm sure that, you know, in the presentation or even after, we'll be able to speak. That is definitely our intention, to provide that differentiation as well. So.
Thank you, President Foster. I think Cheryl Hiblin's going to begin with highlighting supports and services for our secondary students, and what can we expect next year in the world of secondary students that we're investing in as promising practices and services to our students.
Oh, we forgot the pictures. Okay. Thank you. So tonight I brought a couple of, we call them Ed Squared. Ed Abeda and Ed Hidalgo are here. Ed Hidalgo is from Qualcomm and Ed Abeda is from UCSD Extension. And in tonight's LCAP presentation, I couldn't not include what I consider to be a huge team in supporting San Diego Unified, and these two gentlemen are going to bring life to a couple of the efforts that we are going to highlight tonight. So thank you for letting me have a moment to highlight secondary. And if I can get to that slide, we have quite a few pictures in front of this. There we go.
I was supposed to be using those when I did my part.
Okay. I was like, oh. Okay. So on the front of this slide, in terms of sharing what we're doing in the secondary office next year, I couldn't not put Qualcomm, the Moxie Foundation, the San Diego Workforce Partnership, Connect Ed California, Kids Eco Club, UCSD Extension. I couldn't not put them here because the work that's coming is so embedded in what these partners are doing with us that there's no way the secondary office could do this on their own without people in the community who are making this happen for us. So I wanted to make sure that a couple of our business partners were with us tonight. So the first item that I wanted to talk about, and this is something I've been very excited about, two board members I think already have an idea that I've been dying to speak about this, but tonight when Board Member Barrera and Superintendent Martin started talking about unlocking the genius in all students, one of the things that's really coming up next year that we're excited about is how do we, with middle school students, how do we make sure that every single middle school student that leaves 8th grade knows that they have a strength and a place in the future? How do they go into high school knowing that, make selections about what they do in high school knowing that, and how do we make sure that they own that going in? So I hope that Ed won't mind coming up and talking about what this means in terms of our partnership and how we'll move forward with that.
Thank you, Cheryl, and board member, superintendent. It's It's an honor to be here, actually. I should have been here anyways to give you an update at the end of the year for Think a Bit Lab. Without Board Member Barrera and Superintendent Martin listening to some crazy ideas about a year and a half ago, 3,000 students wouldn't have been served between September and June of this year. But this story actually starts probably 20 years ago or further back as a student myself in high school, when I wondered, who would ever want me in the world of work? I was so bad at math. I mean, I was horrible at math. And I pulled my transcripts about 2 months ago just so I could make sure that my memory was accurate. And there were all the D's and the C's. And I think I worked really hard to get those D's and C's, by the way. And I went to private boys' school back in Baltimore, Maryland. My professors were from Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And yet I was so bad at math. And I remember sitting at my desk wondering, who on earth would ever want me? Who would ever want me? What job could I ever achieve when this math thing is so important to the adults? And it was really, focus on deficit remediation, because that's where I would spend my summers in summer school. And I never took a class in debate or speech or the things that I thought maybe I could do okay in. And I went off to college and lumbered around and tried to figure out a place for me. And, finally fell into a major that did kind of suit my talents, but on accident, really. And then when I was 25, my wife was getting her master's at USD in career counseling of all subjects. And she gave me this funny little instrument called the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. And I can still remember the moment where she showed me the results that read, practical service to people. And that was the first moment where I really realized that there was a place for me in the world. And yet I had made it all the way through high school and college without a single conversation about my unique strengths, interests, and values. I was just on this conveyor belt, this journey. And several years later, we found this letter that I had written to my wife that said, wouldn't it be cool if one day we were working with kids, helping them discover their own unique strengths, interests, and values? I was in Miami at the time. She was here at USD. And so I fell into a career of HR. And that's where I've been for about the last 15 years, hiring people. So here's the guy who never thought he could get a job, now hiring people. And my team has hired more than 20,000 people throughout the last 10 years. I'm actually probably one of the few at Qualcomm that's hired everything from a building services attendant or a custodian to an SVP and everything in between. And then I had this crazy idea, remembering that note back to my wife. My first career dream was, what if we could start a career counseling practice within a major Fortune 500 company to help our employees discover their own unique strengths, interests, and values, to help them drive their engagement in the world of work, which could maybe lead to being more productive in the world of work as well. Because employees are always looking for those greener pastures, They want to leave the job they're in today. And ironically enough, most of those employees that I would meet, you're actually in the right job right now. You just don't know it. And you don't know how to develop in role. You've been on this conveyor belt of education as well, in a STEM degree, getting your master's at Berkeley and MIT and UT Austin and UCSD, but no one's ever stopped to talk to you about your own unique strengths, interests, and values. They have just acquired knowledge, skills, and abilities after skipping the steps of strengths, interests, and values. What's at the core of the individual? So imagine that my boss was crazy enough to support this, and now 8 years later, more than 10,000 employees have sought services through our career explorations practice. Amazing. You'd be surprised what these brilliant minds from top universities are saying to us about this opportunity to go through this practice and understand how to own their own careers. By the way, the world of work has changed. There's no more ladder in the world of work, right? You know this. Employees need to own their own careers. Manager no longer owns your career. So it's even more incumbent upon us to help young people explore and understand their own unique strengths, interests, and values so they can manage their own careers. So imagine this, that my boss was crazy twice, and that the second dream was to start this Think a Bit Lab. And when we did, thankfully, Board Member Barrera and Superintendent Martin said, this sounds like a cool idea. Let's give it a shot. In fact, we can't let it fail. So we start this STEM lab. It's all about giving kids exposure to engineering. And we kind of threw in this career explorations piece. So the first hour is all about exploring the world of work. We say, how does a child aspire to a career they don't know exists? When they come into the lab, they start to understand not only that there's careers they didn't know about. Many of these kids have never been on an elevator before, by the way, 6th graders that have never been on an elevator before, have never been to the ocean. Many are homeless. Thank you for the work that you do, right? And now they learn that they have unique strengths, interests, and values that are important to the world. Like that there's a place for them. And they leave on cloud 9. They leave knowing there's something for them out there, even when lots of folks have been telling them, there's nowhere for you. There is a place for them, just like there's a place for me. My resume would never have been pulled out of a stack of resumes, by the way. Never. Never. So what's been particularly exciting is that there's many school districts that all of a sudden have come in and said, we want that STEM lab thing, but this world of work piece that you're talking about, I got to have that. That's something special, and no one's talking about that. How do we get that? How can you help us get that? And that's what I'm really excited about, working with Cheryl and this team, Michael Goodbody, Dr. Abeda, because we cannot predict the jobs of the future. We can't. We can, push every student into a STEM pipeline. What if software engineering becomes automated? I don't think it will, but what if it does? We don't know what the jobs of the future are. And because of that, we need to help each child understand their own unique strengths, interests, and values. So no matter what the jobs of the future are, they'll still know there's a place in the world for them. That's Ed's opinion. That's not necessarily Qualcomm's opinion. But we've been practicing it with lots of engineers. They've been learning how to manage their careers. And a lot of your students are really excited about it. So we're excited to partner. We're excited to go further. We're scared. It's scary doing some of these things, but we believe that there's a lot of potential here. And you have the right team in place. So without the right team, nothing would happen. So thanks for listening. Thanks for not laughing at my stories. And appreciate all the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
No one can tell that story like Ed Hidalgo. So imagine 1,500 San Diego Unified students have had access to that world. What I'm proposing tonight is that all 8th graders in this city have that experience, that they find out in 8th grade or have some investigation in an inventory where their genius is unlocked and they can go into high school, have an experience at a world of work, which I'm hoping that San Diego Unified might actually have their own version of this with Ed's help as a satellite, but that every single 8th grader would have an opportunity to engage with business, engage with their genius, so they go into high school feeling good about themselves, they can advocate for themselves, and they can find their place. Pick their pathway, do what they want to do. But one of the things that we are starting with is on July 2nd, we are going to bring a group of counselors to the Think A Bit Lab, and we all, including myself, have taken the strong inventory, and we are going to go have our genius unlocked so that we can have an experience much like the one that we're going to implement for 8th graders. It's also our hope that, and I know that Qualcomm will support us with this, that every adult in the system, if possible, could have their genius unlocked. So the board could come have their genius unlocked, the superintendent could have their genius unlocked, the principals can have their genius unlocked, and we have some plans, because we think that if adults can experience the value of knowing who you are and knowing that you have gifts, that they might start, to see and adopt and differentiate. Imagine, if you come up as an achiever, and I use this because I'm pretty certain I'm going to come up as an achiever, small tasks, pats on the back. Imagine if you know that about yourself and the teacher knows that, the way, thank you. Yes. The way that a teacher might interact with you differently, knowing that that's what you need. So imagine that. So one of the big initiatives coming out of the secondary office office is this partnership with Ed and Ed from UCSD and the Workforce Partnership to make sure that every student in the system has their genius unlocked and that they have and know who they are and they can advocate for themselves. So that's item 1. Our second item.
Is that what you were talking about, bringing the LCAP alive? Okay, that is in the LCAP. We'll tell the story of it.
Well, and the most important part is that we did see that there were some concerns about the lack of support for middle school students, so this particular piece was so important. The other really exciting thing that we have coming up is that the Workforce Partnership, in conjunction with the community colleges and Qualcomm, they looked at the 5 at San Diego and saw that there are 5 industry sectors that are driving high wage, high need areas, and they developed these, I guess you can call them factual posters or just knowledge about advanced manufacturing, information technology, healthcare, life science, green energy. And as you know, we applied for a Career Pathway Trust grant, and we won in the area of information technology, green energy, and advanced manufacturing. So one of the things that we're making sure that we ordered 50 sets of those posters on foam board, and we are preparing an opportunity in conjunction with Qualcomm, the Workforce Partnership, UCSD Extension, and Oceanside School District to come up with a way to have a training where people come and have an experience, and we unlock this world of career that exists in our own city. So we want to have the apprenticeships there, talking about the apprenticeships. We want to talk about, there was a career fair at San Diego High School this year. It was very successful. It was put on by Connect to Careers with the Workforce Partnership. We want to open and have career fairs at our priority schools next year, all 5 of them. We want to have this opportunity, give them the posters, talk to them, so they start talking to kids not just about college or 4-year college, but about all the other things that they can do, jobs they can have while they're in college that will lead to other jobs, just anything that will get kids excited about being in school and having hope and opportunity. And I forgot to say when Ed was up that something he said this morning resonated with me in all these areas. He said, a student's expectation of self has the largest impact on achievement. And it's my hope through these moments that we work with adults and students around this empowerment that student self will rise and they'll know that anything is possible from no matter where they're at when they arrive. The final thing, and Ed didn't talk about this when he was up, but he'll nod, so we are discussing how do we put a Think a Bit lab on a San Diego Unified Middle School. So where do we put the Think a Bit lab? How do we put it there? How do kids have that engagement at a middle school? So that's a project we're going to work on between now and well, maybe mid next year or the end of next year. But we want middle school students to be engaged in coding and have that experience, and if it's successful, replicate that at other places. So we have some thoughts about where that might happen. And then this is a slow load, okay. And then we have the demonstration site at Clairmont, and Dr. Roberson was going to be here tonight to present this, but Chloe Roberson needed her. So I'm going to give us an overview. So there's some exciting work going on at Clairmont High School, and they are engaged around pathway work. Unlike the Kearney schools that are autonomous, Clairmont is a traditional high school who's going to use pathways inside of a traditional structure to do what schools in California are questioning can they do. Can they take a traditional high school and not break it into small autonomous schools and have these rich pathways that exist? And this is happening through major partnerships with all the community colleges, with UCSD, with Qualcomm. All the groups are surrounding Clairmont to make this happen. They're going to have a green energy, an IT, healthcare, and that they already have the very successful Academy of Business, which is their model. So right now in San Diego Unified, the Clairmont teams are at the Link Learning Institute all this week and next week, learning to do design thinking around how they're going to plan what happens for kids. So starting in September, the 9th and 10th grades at that school will be engaged engaged in the interdisciplinary thematic work, and then in the following year it'll break out 9 through 12, and Dr. Roberson and Board Member Evans can set that up. That's just a general overview of what's to come. Another piece that we've been working on, and I just think that this is just hugely important in our work, is this master schedule and student scheduling work. So on Thursday at the professional development at USD, the site operations specialist at Sarah High School has built something, and I'm going to put a big smile on my face because I think it's going to change the way that scheduling is done, perhaps outside of San Diego. He has built a database that literally, when he was watching, I was working at Sarah with the team there on scheduling, and we were doing it from an equity lens. We were saying, let's look at groups of kids. How many English learners do we put in a room? How do we look at special ed? Do we mix? What do we do? And he watched us working and said, this is inefficient. So he went back and got his FileMaker Pro out and built a database that literally, when we show the principals on Thursday, you can load all your course requests into it. You can tell the database, I would like to see all the English 1 students in this school, and I'd like to know if they have any special needs. You can pull it up, and you can make sure and assign them in smaller groups when you schedule them. So imagine how this tool is going to help the Lincoln scheduling, where we're not even doing cohorts, we're doing teams at each level. It is an amazing tool. It's going to change the way we think and operate about kids, and I'm really excited because I think master schedules are the philosophy of our, it's the center of our work, and I think this is going to change the way we do business, change the lives of children.
So just explain that just a little bit, how students are grouped.
So the database will allow us, because one of the things that I think is really important is no school is the same. You can't do cookie cutter scheduling and cookie cutter master scheduling. So what we do is we sit with teams. Like today we were at Mission Bay, and Mission Bay has an A-BEAD 4x4 and an IB program. So the entire thing's pre-IB. So we were literally taking Mission Bay's course requests and loading them into this database, and then we are going to sit and ask ourselves, okay, how many English learners at what level are in this class? Because we meet with kids one-on-one and we schedule them, right? But we're looking at groups. How many do we have? If we know in a school, and I'll use Lincoln for an example, when you have 428 English learners, when I went over to Lincoln and we started talking about teaming, yes, you have to be really careful, because if the concentration of them is in one grade level and you only have 20 sections of something, you have to be really careful about what you do, how you group, and get really strategic. And what this database will allow is there to be thinking around what to do. Should we only have 8 English learners in a mainstream class so that the co-teaching or the team can think about language? Should we have a different setup where if students with disabilities, should we only put 8 in a room with the co-teacher and focus on accommodation? Like, what should we do? And I'm not saying there's one way or the other way, but just that the thinking around the actions matter. And getting it in that it does matter which direction we put kids in. It's not just about that one-on-one moment with a student, which is great, but what happens when we throw them all up into the loader? That matters too.
It's intentional, purposeful placement with a theory of action behind it.
Yeah. And this is exciting. Now, I hope everyone's going to be as excited as I am about it. We'll find out on Thursday. But the principals that we have been working with see, oh my goodness, this is something that will change my ability to think about how we do this. And then they can batch schedule. And they don't have to put cohorts of kids in the same classes all day, but they can. If they want to do sheltered instruction like they do at Kearney, they can keep them together and keep them with 4 teachers. If they don't want to do that, they can put them in different cohorts. But at least the design, the artistry of what we do, and the purpose of how we organize students and adults, in my mind, that matters. And so I'm really excited about this tool and what it's going to be able to do. So, Thursday. And then finally, we are just beginning our conversations around innovation centers. So what does that mean? I think at this point in the conversation, it's a structural item. It means organizing things like our college tutoring programs, our community college programs, our credit recovery, our enrichment, our SAT prep, our AccuPlacer prep, anything that is an additional exciting support for a student would go in a space on the school that felt positive. And I think the most important thing about these centers is that sometimes we have spaces and kids know that they're going there because they're credit deficient. The idea here is that whatever a kid needed, acceleration, credit recovery, a college course, whatever they need, tutoring, that they would go to a place that was positive. College banners up, apprenticeship flyers around, internship opportunities, but just that there was this place that they could go, and who knows what they could find. Maybe they don't know about the other things, but they go to the center, and it's there for them. So what a nice way for Mildred and I talked about the middle college fitting into this innovation center at Lincoln, and how it would be really cool for kids to see all the possibilities at Lincoln. So those are the big 6 that I wanted to share, although we have a lot of exciting UCSD things coming up, and Ed will have to come back and talk about those. But those are the big ideas for the secondary office, and I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to talk about how excited we are about this work.
Your next few slides are on Clairmont High School transformation, and I think you were going to have Dr. Roberson here, so I don't know if they got taken out.
Yeah, you know what? So I want to make sure that she has an opportunity to kind of come and do the really deep talk as soon as this officially. I think Irwin and Peter Zahn are going to come and do an official partnership agreement, but Clairmont is, like I said, going to have four academies, and they're going through the design process right now. And then I think she just put in a couple. She wanted you to see what the importance of an academy is: the student cohorts, the teacher teams, the curriculum sequences. It's just that purposeful, small amounts of kids with small adult eyes on them. It's the same thing as the teaming at Lincoln, but just in a different flavor at Clairmont.
Keep going so that the next presenter doesn't have to go through.
Dr. Roberson gave me quite a bit here.
She did.
And it's a Link Learning Academy, so the coursework is interdisciplinary. And I believe that she had a video, but we will skip over that and she can show it next time.
So it's still comprehensive, but these are pathways, the sector pathways that you spoke about earlier.
Right, so
yeah.
Unlike Kearney, where they're separate cost centers, or unlike San Diego High, where they're separate cost centers, this is actually the future of pathway work. People aren't moving to small autonomous schools really anymore just because of the cost.
Right.
They are moving to how do we build strong pathways so kids have access to core, they can share courses, and they have access to the pathways. So I think the state, especially the Link Learning Alliance, is really looking at how to do it that way.
And just out of curiosity, are they cohort based, but then they share common instructors?
So in pathway schools, the cohorting is done around the pathway course. So the computer science course, the health course, the engineering course, that is what we call the oxymoron because it's the mandatory elective. So that becomes the center of all the interdisciplinary work. So the thing that would bring them together, all of the schools would have English, math, all levels, advanced, but the thing that holds them together, the glue, are the pathway courses that are integrated into all of their work in an interdisciplinary fashion. I should also say that Mesa College has really stepped up, and because Clairmont is breaking only 9 and 10 next year, they've created an 11-12 experience for them to go through math and English courses so they're prepared to go into college, so the 11th and 12th graders have something special too.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here to tell you about our collaborative ELST efforts, and I want to start by telling the story a little bit about how we laid this ground. And in really thinking about, there's a quote that I love that says that any intervention, the success of an intervention has more to do with the internal condition of the intervener than the intervention itself. So as area superintendents launched into this work, there was a few things that we had to make very clear to ourselves and the intention we had with this creation. We wanted it to really be a creation from ELSTs, from a grassroots efforts, to really capture their ideas on how to best do the work. I know that we called it tapping into a resource that we've had, really looking at them and saying, what do you think? What have you seen? You've been doing this work. What would possibly work across our sites? We also were very mindful about Tuckman's stages of group development. That is a theory that discusses how groups become, and it starts by saying that in the beginning it's actually called storming. So people are uncomfortable with it, saying, who am I? What are we doing here? Why are we together? And I'm sure you got some of that feedback too. So there was a lot of storming, but we're in the forming stages now, where we're seeing our identity, we're seeing the purpose of our work, and so that was another thing we wanted to be mindful of. And we also were so mindful of the creative space that we wanted to create for our stakeholders that we didn't really go into detail about what we were doing. And I remember actually saying we don't want to muddy the creative waters, because sometimes unconsciously we start steering, right? So we really wanted it to come from them. Now, having said that, a lot of things emerged. So now we've started this work a long time ago, feels like months ago. We created a matrix to kind of compare all of our outcomes across the areas, and we're very similar. There are some very similar strategies that I'll actually reference when we go further into this presentation. So with any new group creation, there is something that I like to reference called BART. There are some boundaries. B is for boundaries. So the boundaries were our 5 district priorities. There it is. Oh, that skipped the slide. Uh-oh. I think it's missing too. Well, I'll just talk about it then. And I spent a long time creating this slide because I am not tech savvy.
So it's just going.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, the 5 district priorities. And so these were set by our superintendent. These are the boundaries that the group had to do their work. The first one and the biggest one, of course, is a very engaged Elac. We have to engage our stakeholders, our parents, our teachers, everyone that has a stake in the education of our English language learners. And I've been reflecting, so I've had a year of area superintendent work and 10 years of principal work, and I think about true engagement. I think sometimes we stand and deliver information, but just true robust engagement of our community, and that's going to be over everything that we're going to talk about next. Celt Administration, of course, it's a compliance issue. That's the second priority. We have to make sure that we follow our compliance and that every school has that service and support that they need, because every school site is different. We have to strengthen our Tier 1 instruction. Our first-time instruction for all English language learners is very important. So how do we build capacity in all of our teachers and our sites to have this really strong Tier 1 instruction and what we would call integrated and designated English language development? Also, response to intervention. So if a child is not succeeding, if a child's not acquiring a language, if they're at risk of becoming long-term English language learners, or they're newcomers at a high school, what interventions are we creating? And one of the things, and the reason why I placed the arrow down here, is all of those priorities will then lead to reclassification. Of course, reclassification, we need to be mindful of that that is the goal, that we want to make sure that we advocate for children, and we know that the doors that open up through this reclassification. I do want to, I captured a couple of the quotes from the ELSTs during this planning process, and just 2, but anyway, I will share it. If we strengthen designated and integrated ELD and do small group instruction, there will be no academic gap. So they really believe in these 5 priorities and say if you truly do this and build capacity across our site, you will no longer see this academic gap. Our goal is to build capacity in our teachers in a supportive way to create knowledgeable instructors of English learners that they are able to designate immediately who needs to be reclassified and then advocate for this student. Because many times we saw the role of the ELST being the sole person advocating for English language learners, and they want to build that level of advocacy and knowledge in all of our instructors. So does this mean I have to go back, or does it repeat? Oh, perfect. So I want to tell you about collaboration because collaboration takes time. And so there was this tension between collaborating and collective creation and allowing things to emerge and dreaming of all these beautiful possibilities. And then, where's the information? What does it look like? Why haven't you told us? And so there's a tension that we have to hold. And I call myself a San Diego unifier, so we need to be able to hold both spaces. How do we hold both spaces of the tension of being able to produce this information for stakeholders, but also to solicit the feedback and the collaboration necessary? So we have to do both. So I referenced the matrix of all of the ideas, but I first want to let you know that between all the areas, there was over 43 meetings engaging stakeholders. And so that's a lot of meetings together. And that was because we wanted to really make sure to go and to really engage them in a true way. And I will tell you, there's of course differences. There's some areas that only have a few, 4 ELSTs, other areas that have 14. So the way we went about engaging those amount of people were slightly different, but in the end it was really beautiful to see a matrix of how things emerged very similarly. So some of the things that emerged and that you can expect for next year is the Celt. So ELST said we need to know every single site. So every area engaged in a survey of every single school. So some areas were with SurveyMonkey, and other areas the ELSTs went and met one-on-one with the principal to ask questions about all of the supports that they have in place for English language learners to thoroughly know what it was at that site. And I think this year it has sometimes been feast or famine. So some schools that could afford the ELST had one, some schools didn't and kind of made do. So we're trying to build a plan, and we are building a plan about how we're going to support on a site-by-site basis. On a site-by-site basis, but also everybody. So it's not just feast or famine, it's everyone. What I love about this piece is that it came from ELST saying we want to go meet the principals, we're going to serve, we want to step on the school's site of what it looks like, we want to gather this information to help create these plans. So that was one of the things that came out. Also the Tier 1, they said they wanted to build capacity but aligned with the district efforts. So our district has learning cycles that you've heard a lot about, and also this Lucy Calkins writing model. And so they said we need to marry these things. We need to say these are the district efforts, but how is it designated and integrated for English language learners, and really collaboratively work together. And I think this will accomplish twofold. So not only will there be collaboration between ELSTs and Common Core resource teachers, but there's supportive measures for teachers as well. We don't want them to feel like these learning cycles and this Lucy Calkins is another thing on the plate. We want them to feel like it's the umami in the food. It's already in there. It's on the plate already, and it tastes really good when we do this. The last one, and I referenced this before when I spoke to you, is a cluster Elac model. They dreamt the possibility was how can we strengthen a whole cluster and really think about when we're making these decisions in our Elac from preschool all the way to 12th grade, and seeing them all the way through and vertically aligned. And again, twofold, strengthen our cluster, but also strengthen our practice of our Elac. So that's an idea that's a possibility for next year. So there's a lot of things in common, and those are some of the ideas and possibilities. And lastly, there's some very clear next steps. We need to continue our Elac engagement. I have held one meeting, but I still have a couple more to do, as well as other areas. We're still not done. So even though we've had 43 meetings, we're still not done engaging everybody that we seem would be good stakeholders to access feedback from. We need to think about nitty-gritty work, and this is the nitty-gritty. I think it's a technical sort of challenge that we can answer right away. So timekeeping evaluations, I need a computer. It's technical challenges, but ELSTs need to know. So in order to do this work, they need to make sure that we know how to answer this. And I think that I want to thank, actually, because every time I met with these ELSTs, and I'm thinking about Maggie and Holly and Kathleen and Michelle and Katya and Laura, and I'm sure there's more, and I hope I didn't forget anybody. They're brilliant. And I leave the meetings amazed with how great they are and how well they advocate for students. And so I look forward to having that such a big resource for my area and for all areas, that we have someone that's going to come in and help support all of our schools. And again, all of our schools, not feast or famine. One of the things that they've requested is that they're paired in triads so they could continue learning from each other and help lead a school. So at a school school side, we're developing right now what that plan is going to look like. You won't have one ELST, you'll have 3 ELSTs supporting your site. So that's a few things that you can look forward to with our ELST plan.
Did parents participate in these first meetings, those just meetings with ELs?
Those parents participated invited through Elac. And everyone handled it a little bit differently because of the amount in Area 6. I try to do a traditional and a year-round, so I still haven't had a year-round. I was not satisfied with the amount of people that came to traditional, so it looks like I'll probably have to do a couple more just to make sure to get more feedback from them. So, but I actually want to appreciate Daniel for bringing parents to our meetings all the time. Daniel, who works for our community at Crawford, was really helpful in bringing more people to the table at the first Elac meeting.
And Fabi, because of your approach, we're already seeing returns on that investment, the slow, careful way that you've formed, the dialogue around ESLTs and how we're approaching the reclassification for English language learners and all that. Since this conversation centers around giving an example of what we're doing with the LCAP, have you already, or have we thought about this presentation, because it's so incredibly clear, to be given at the DLAC, so that folks can see this is the investment, this is where we are, this is where we're going at this, at that level.
I think that's a really good idea, and frankly, I wanted to share the matrix as well. It's just I'm not a fan of lots of text on a PowerPoint,
Right,
and that's
sure.
overwhelming because it's all areas with 5 priorities. But it was really beautiful to see how these ideas emerged and how synergistic they were.
Yeah.
How we're all on the same page, moving in the same way together.
Describe what the matrix is again.
So the matrix has the 5 district priorities and all of the areas and what feedback we've received and what ideas they've had on the table. And so you'll clearly see that across all areas, everyone's kind of on the same page for CELT, for Tier 1, for response to intervention, for reclassification, and for ELAC. And it was really beautiful the way it came out. So I think that the investment in time was worth it. But I think there's still more work to do, like you said. And I think engaging DLAC with this presentation, plus the matrix and a couple of other documents we've developed, will be really helpful.
Right.
And since the matrix came from that process that was organic, led through each area, ELAC members were a part of it, so it only makes sense if ELAC members then can help present to the wider DLAC, because they've all had a voice in creating where we are with the matrix. It's a good suggestion. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Vernon Moore, Office of Youth Advocacy, and I am very pleased to present this evening. If we recall a few board meetings ago back in early March, Superintendent Martin accelerated the timeline of introducing the Office of Youth Advocacy and had named me as the executive director of that, and it's been an honor these last few months in getting the office up and going, and we are this summer preparing to launch into a lot of initiatives. And so tonight I hope to offer you a preview of really some of the work that Office of Youth Advocacy is going to be engaged in. We begin with the vision and mission statements of the group and of this team, and you'll see that it really dovetails very nicely with, of course, our district's overall mission, but with the work that is going on in a lot of our departments and in our teams. For example, I sit on the instructional cabinet with the area superintendents, with the leadership and learning, with the secondary schools office, and that's the team that plans our professional development with our principals and really pours over our instructional plans. So youth advocacy is a key key component of that work, and it's really kind of the net that's really trying to capture things and bring them together. I really appreciated something I heard from Ed Hidalgo during Cheryl's presentation about strengths, interests, and values, and you'll see even in the mission statement pieces that we're trying to open up minds and really consider multiple opportunities to success. We're challenging our beliefs as we move towards cultural proficiency, involving stakeholders in meaningful dialogue, just as we've heard in our work with our ELSTs and our Elac. And really, one of the very beginning things that I started to do was really go back and look at our foundational documents, our Vision 2020, our local control accountability plan, our pledge to our males of color that we did earlier this year, our cultural proficiency standards and the resolution associated with that. We had just recently an ethnic studies resolution, a blueprint to accelerate the achievement of African American and African students. A lot of our documents and resolutions are coming together, and you'll see some of that work being supported by the Office of Youth Advocacy. One of the first things, and again, this was a foundational document from 2013, was our diversity resolution, which was passed by the board unanimously, and the thrust of it was creating our San Diego Unified Through Diversity Committee. And so that committee will be transferring. It was under our district relations team, and that will be transferring to the Office of Youth Advocacy. We've held a meeting with some of the team members to really start to get that transfer underway. But the resolution and this committee really speaks to some of our recent initiatives around ethnic studies, as well as cultural proficiency and the implementation related to that. And so as we work in our last board meeting, we talked about how Race and Relations will be working directly with youth advocacy. So that group I have certainly begun dialoguing with, and we are planning a series of meetings with the Unified Through Diversity team, as well as these other constituency groups, because I see this Unified Through Diversity team as being an umbrella for some of our major constituency groups, including the Blueprint Task Force, including the Latino Advisory Committee, including the Safe Schools Task Force. And representatives from those groups have a voice at our Unified Through Diversity meetings, and really pouring over and leading the work in implementing cultural proficiency standards, implementing ethnic studies, and a lot of the other initiatives that we've been tackling in recent board meetings. One of the carryovers in this work, and I work really closely with Dr. Fulcher. I'm part of the Student Services team. That's prior to Office of Youth Advocacy. I was working in Executive Director of Student Services, and one of the things I was working on was this San Diego Youth Opportunity Pathways Initiative, and we just spoke of it earlier today in our resolution regarding dropout prevention and recovery. And this is a very special initiative, and in fact, Dr. Fulcher is on a flight today to continue advocating for that up north and at a meeting there. And the work, I have to say, has really been directed by our Dropout Prevention Program Manager, Becky Philpott, and this is such a unique and powerful collaboration with a lot of civic entities, including San Diego Workforce Partnership, including the Youth Development Office, and including the Urban League. And while it's a very focused effort in some of our neighborhoods to specifically address youth who have disconnected and potentially dropped out of our system. The key is actually the partnership that's being formed is really looking to be more proactive and using some metrics to identify students who could be on the verge or as we've talked about some in other meetings, early warning that they are considering dropping out and really getting some support and services in some targeted areas to those students. And so obviously a lot of our work and the work in youth advocacy will be directed in really trying to capture and bring these students and connect them back to our schools so that they can contribute and fulfill their dreams of getting education. This is a really important effort, and it's already underway. And though this particular effort, this Pathways effort, is a very focused in some certain neighborhoods, the idea is to grow our partnership and relationship and have more effect with our district at large. We also mentioned mentoring, and that came up in Superintendent Martin's overall explanation of some of the features in the LCAP. And our Office of Youth Advocacy will be taking an active role in developing a larger district-wide mentoring. What you're seeing pictures here in the presentation is a mentoring program that was really a pilot at San Diego High School, the School of Business and Leadership. And we recruited about, it was a partnership with the Association of African American Educators, and we recruited about 30 mentors that worked directly with over 40 students. And this is the pictures you see here are the celebration we held at the end of May. And to hear these students, many of them graduating, the kids, the 40-plus kids, really talking about what their mentor meant to them. And when you think about a mentoring program and making it robust and having folks that are trained and working directly with students, what we're really talking about is folks who know how to, first of all, listen to the students. That's one of the key pieces of mentoring, is just taking some time, individual time, to listen to students, offering inspiration and guidance, and then advocating at times when necessary, and coaching students really to advocate for themselves. And this work is so powerful. And the mentors we were required to meet with the students twice a month. But even in just that little amount of time, the relationships and the success stories that came from that endeavor were extraordinarily powerful. And the testimonies of the students at this celebration event that was held at the end of May was really moving. And so the idea is to create this program, scale it up, identify some schools and some students that need this type of support, and really involve not just some select community volunteers, but members of our district and other staff, members of our partner organizations, and say, how can we affect student mentoring on a much larger scale? And this is just some very exciting work, and I'm really looking forward to it. You probably have heard that there's a principal on special assignment that was already announced earlier this meeting. That's Principal Gretchen Rhodes, and she was she's in the picture. She really spearheaded this effort at San Diego High, and so having her come aboard with the youth advocacy and working in this capacity is going to be very exciting. Also, that's come up as a large area of need is our Lgbtq supports for our students and our community members, and there's some exciting initiatives again that are not simply resting in the Office of Youth Advocacy, but really shared by a lot of groups and a lot of offices. For instance, we will be launching in October an Out for Safe Schools campaign, wherein, and we've been working with a lot of our labor organizations and other groups doing these presentations where staff members can voluntarily wear a badge that indicates to students that they have received some training, and they are very knowledgeable about resources and supports for students who are struggling with identity, students who may be going through some crises at home, but really directed at our LGBTQ students. And there's a Safe Schools, the Safe Schools Month against in October against with anti-bullying and anti-harassment. This is really to coincide with that. And so we've got the badges, we're planning the training, and we're working with our partner organizations. The funding for this comes from a CDC grant that rests in our health department, which is part of our secondary schools office. And so that's why I say, again, this is a huge collaborative effort with youth advocacy, leadership and learning, secondary schools, all of our labor organizations coming together to let students know that there are our schools are safe environments, and there are identified folks to go to that can assist and refer students to resources that they need as they're struggling, if they're struggling through things. And when you look at this, it's LGBTQ, but it's actually larger than that to say, are we creating safe spaces for all of our students as they go through the challenges of adolescence and into adulthood. And so another piece of this, as you'll see, one of the graphics is about the FAIR Act, because we've got to really wrap our minds around some of the initiatives, the AB 9, which is Seth's law about anti-bullying and harassment, the Senate Bill 48, which is the Fair Education Act, which is about making sure we encompass a curriculum that reflects the diversity of our students, including our LGBT students and as well as our students with disabilities. And additionally, AB 1266, which is requiring us to make sure that our facilities are understanding of students that are transgender and going through going through that and part of their life. And so we've got to ensure that we are responsive in wrapping our minds around that as not just as legal mandates, but also in creating these environments for our students. And that's a key focus of the Office of Youth Advocacy, is to continue to keep those issues and concerns at the forefront. And one of the final things, and we heard this also in the introduction, is this idea around student advocacy groups. And again, through the work of the Race, Human Relations, and Advocacy Department that works directly with our ASBs, our student governments, specifically at our high school sites, the notion that we need to make sure that our clubs and advocacy and there's leadership opportunities for students to really get involved either through their culture or through their identity and other avenues. When we think about student government and ASB, and these are being the elected representatives, those are great opportunities for leadership. Well, we're looking to expand that and ensure, and most of our schools have these, but we're looking to expand those leadership opportunities to ensure that students that reflect our diversity get similar opportunities for leadership roles. One of the pictures that you'll see in the presentation is really near and dear to me. It's a celebration of Karen youth at Crawford High School. And Karen youth are students that are refugee status from Burma, and they have formed a Karen youth organization on the Crawford campus that has been running for many years, and they have cultural celebrations in the sense of pride where they are able to share their culture with the entire campus and put on productions and host events. And the Superintendent Martin attended an event earlier this year where many members of that group were put on an art exhibit. But the notion that these groups are able to, one, serve as a mechanism of self-identity, but two, also connect to larger community events and organizations, is simply a tremendous opportunity for our students to find that voice and agency that we've certainly been advocating and talking about, and what we want to see in our LCAP. And so in conclusion, when you look at Vision 2020, you look at our local accountability plan, and you consider our charge, and it sits on the placards by us about our students graduating, succeeding, and leading and participating. And then we incorporate the idea of working with our stakeholders and working to develop our students' voice and agency, our work around galvanizing ourselves around our foundational documents. Well, that's then the work of youth advocacy really becomes essential and ingrained and integral to all the work that we do. So I look forward to many more board presentations so we can continually update you all and the public around the work that we're doing.
So now you have some highlights of what's inside the LCAP actually brought to life by the leadership, some of the key leaders that are behind the work that we're doing. Focus on secondary and students having the supports they need to be successful in secondary, focusing on English learners and the supports we'll put in place for English learners, and across everything is youth advocacy, cultural proficiency, our African American, African Latino students, LGBT efforts going across all of them. And these strategies are in the LCAP, but what we wanted to do tonight is bring them to life.
Yeah, we do. Wait a minute. Let me make sure I'm correct on that. Yes. So we'll bring up the speakers now, and then we'll have more board comments. The first, well, we have Lindsay Birmingham, and then we have Norma Sandoval. And you can come up in any order. What's that? Imani Robinson, are you here? I don't think so.
Good evening, Superintendent, board members, and our district staff who is here to present tonight. So I'm here speaking on behalf of our LCAP coalition. The first year of the LCAP last year, the coalition consisted of the ACLU, Alliance San Diego, SDOP, Educate for the Future, SDEA, POA, and ARDE. And this year we are proud to have added CSEA and the PTA. We came together as a coalition to focus on three main points in the LCAP. And so today I want to talk to you just about a few of those. You guys addressed a lot of what I was going to say earlier on, and we truly appreciate that. And so just to hit real quickly on communications, I think for our coalition that was a big piece that people felt was missing this year. A lot of the parents never even knew it was time to give input on the LCAP, hadn't received the information they needed to receive. The site meetings, we really see, I understand the importance of the clusters, but the sites are also an important place to get stakeholder input and input as to how the LCAP impacts those individual sites. So we would like to see the opportunities expanded at the site level for input, whether that's through site governance teams, PTAs, existing structures that are there, and then also at the cluster level. Many of our clusters have already full agendas, so if it's an important piece such as the LCAP, have a separate meeting so that there's actually the time to give the attention to it. And then the second piece we wanted to hit on tonight is also investing behind the importance of community engagement and stakeholder input. Somebody hit on it earlier, but the whole idea of some parents not even knowing what the LCAP is. An LCAP 101. What is the LCAP? Why is it important that your voice is heard in the LCAP? It's something that's been missing, and a lot of our parents aren't even aware. So possibly starting off the beginning of the school year. This is the LCAP, something coming home from the principal, something coming home from the SGTs or the PTA. This is the LCAP, and this is your opportunity to be a part of it throughout the year. We know those cluster meetings are scheduled in advance. We know principals schedule their site governance meetings, PTA meetings all throughout the year. So kind of kicking off the year with information, getting the parents involved in the importance of it, and then finally investing in community engagement, investing in training opportunities for parents to learn they all have a voice, but learning how to use that voice in the most effective way to impact change at their schools, as well as investing in community organizers that are there as advocates for the parents to help them advocate for themselves, and most importantly for their students, to have a voice in what is going on, not just at the district level, but also what that looks like at their school level. So again, thank you for the information tonight. Was great in regards to what exactly some of this is going to look like, and we look forward to working with you moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Dear board members and superintendent, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Norma Sandoval, and I am the co-chair of San Diego Organizing Project and a member of the LCAP Coalition, formed, like she mentioned a minute ago, by several community organizations. But today, and I also want to take this time to give my appreciation to Board Member Foster, Board Member Barrera, as well as Mr. McCary, Board Member McCary, for coming and attending our meetings and listening to our concerns. And I hope that Superintendent Martin and the other board members can value the time that we put into this and be able to read into the letter that we gave you. Today, however, I stand before you as a parent whom the district failed to outreach. You highlight the importance of cluster meetings and how these were the means of parent engagement. However, I, as a mother, I was never notified of cluster meetings for my son's school. Even simple coffee with the principal meetings failed to give me timely notice, as I am often informed one day before, and it's actually on the evening before the meeting. This is unacceptable, and is by no means parent engagement. We live in an era of technology-based, where family outreach is just but an email, a phone call, or a text away, and can be scheduled and informed weeks ahead. As a school administrator, I am highly informed about LCAP and participated in my own district. I'm informed about the 8 priorities and the process. I was actually present at the State Board of Education meeting regarding local control funding, whose purpose was to engage, as the title states, local control. Had a better dissemination of information have been done, I could have been contributing greatly to my son's school's LCAP planning. That, sadly, was a missed opportunity. For next year, I urge you to disseminate information to families in multiple means, and that in addition to cluster meetings, host site-driven LCAP meetings at parent advisory gatherings conducted at sites at both morning and afternoon gatherings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Trustee Barrera?
It's so many comments on what the speakers just talked about, and especially our presentation. I think I'd start by saying that, that what we heard from the speakers and what we've heard, so often through the LCAP process, the work that you've just brought to life is something that so many people in this community have been waiting so long to be a part of. So the opportunities, I think, to engage, community stakeholders are there. Number one, because people want to be engaged, people want to have voice. But number two, because people are going to be excited to engage around this work. Because it's exciting, and it's again a long time coming. The themes that kind of really stood out to me, and that Fabi, Vernon, and Cheryl, you all emphasized in different ways. One, this theme about unlocking the genius of every student and connecting kids to opportunities that they probably don't know about, don't have a sense of. So important, so exciting, and we know that the difference in all of our lives has always been that somewhere along the line we were helped to figure out what our strengths were, and we were helped to connect our strengths to real opportunities that we had no idea existed. So when Ed Hidalgo talked about first time kids are on an elevator, or first time kids have seen the beach, it's also the first time kids know about Qualcomm and know about apprenticeships and know about all of these different opportunities that are out there, that we as a school system have the ability to make those connections that kids otherwise wouldn't have. Incredibly exciting work. There's also a theme around community. And I heard that especially coming out in Fabi, your presentation. This idea that people can actually come together and figure out what would actually work, what's important, and then be part of implementing, because people are connected to each other. And what you talked about, sort of the work of ELSTs working together at particular schools, but also, obviously that theme of community, came out in the way that we would group students, at the secondary level, and everything that Vernon is talking about is based in community. So we've got this theme of unlocking genius and connecting young people to opportunities. We've got this theme of people being part of a community and making change, from being part of a community. And what strikes me about the work, Vernon, that you're leading is it's linked by a commitment to justice. And I think what we've seen this week, again, reminds us that we are, in the same way that Ed talked about, nobody knows what the jobs of the future look like, and so we've got to equip our kids, we've got to build the capacity of our kids to go out and succeed in a world where jobs are going to be changing, a lot of things are going to be changing. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the fact that if you're born today, or you enter school today in this city, and the truth is anywhere in this country, and you're black, you're brown, you're gay, you're a woman, or you're an immigrant, or your family's an immigrant, dramatically restricts the opportunities that you're going to have in your life. And that hasn't changed. And, we talk about progress that we've made as a society, but we know today that that remains an absolute fact of life in our community. The circumstances that you enter our school system are determinative about where you're going to be when you leave our school system. And those circumstances are defined by racism, and they're defined by inequality, and they're defined by bigotry, and they're defined by sexism, and all of these things that, again, when we came to school and grew up in a generation, we thought that we had moved past these issues that had restricted us and that had restricted our parents and grandparents' generations, and yet we look up today and we realize we're leaving our kids in the same set of circumstances. And so, as important as the work that we do to connect kids to opportunity and the exciting work about the future that they can help build, is a responsibility, unfortunately, that once again our generation as adults leave to our kids, which is they're going to have to figure this out because we didn't figure it out for them. We didn't do the job. And so the work of justice, that Vernon is leading, it's not just about helping kids understand themselves and understand each other, although that's, of course, incredibly important. It's also helping young people understand they've got a responsibility to overcome these issues that we just have yet to break through, and unless we break through, the world that they're going to leave to their kids is going to have the same kind of limiting factors as the world we're leaving to our kids. So unlocking the kids' genius and connecting to opportunity, building a sense of community, and people can come together and make change, but it has to be central to the education of young people in our district that they're gonna confront injustice and they're gonna do something about it. And so you put all of this work together, and we've got an entire community out here that wants to connect to it, that wants to be a part of it, that wants to support it. It's not going to people and saying, blank slate, you know, tell us what you want, and people just come up with ideas, and you know, we put things on a butcher paper and then they go into a shell. You're creating a sense of moving something forward that people want to connect to. And so it makes it not just that we should do engagement, it's the work will have so much more life to it as we bring people into it and engage people into it. So Superintendent Martin, I thank you for bringing this to life. I thank you for this vision where we see that we can go. And I thank, you know, Cheryl and Vernon and Fabiola and everybody in our leadership team for kind of setting the stage for us. And now let's pull everybody together and really make this stuff happen. And I look forward to, again, what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Let's have the regular reports. Let's talk about how we implement, you know, how we take things to scale. Let's talk about where we are, and let's do that together honestly and transparently as a community, and where we're making progress, let's celebrate it, and where we need to change some directions, let's commit to it. But we've got a community that's ready to be part of this work, so thank you.
Trustee Barrera, I just have to thank you for speaking so powerfully and so eloquently about what exists and what's possible and what it's going to take in terms of the collective to get there. And in this process, we are going to develop, what comes to mind is this 2020 vision, right? Because it's not about one perspective, it's about multiple perspectives, and the ability to develop those multiple perspectives so that we can do what needs to be done for all students in achieving the outcomes that we say that we want, that we do want, right? And part of that is this demonstration. This demonstration is key, and I think that that's what stakeholders are waiting for. So this is a proud moment for me to be, sitting and working beside everyone here, because what you've just expressed is what many have been longing to hear, and what you've expressed, coupled with action, invest in the trust that is needed to bring about that change. So this is a real proud, I'm just so appreciative to be here. I don't know that, and you and Trustee Evans have been here the longest on this board, and I would just venture to say this dais hasn't seen these types of dialogues in years. So I thank you because this is what I'm talking about. So, yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for the great work you're doing and for the superintendent. And I think we can even see, we talked a lot about communication tonight, and even the difference from our last presentation, which I know is meeting compliance and so forth, but in terms of really bringing it alive today. And I think this is in line with what Lindsay Birmingham was saying in terms of really increasing the participation of the broader community. One of the things we brought up to the superintendent at the beginning of this year was there were certain engaged parents and community members, but we wanted to really broaden the whole ownership of the schools. And I think, we've had these, some presentations at cluster meetings. I think a lot of it does have to happen at the school, like she was saying, because that's where a lot of it happens. Because ultimately, parents are concerned about how does this affect my child and the children that they're with. And so I think one of the things would be to really look at, as she was saying, starting off the beginning of the year, but really highlighting particular topics at different points in the year, as you do in the reports here to the board. But I think, parents would turn out for a meeting that's talking about great, exciting new things happening in high school. Parents who have English language learners would really come out if they knew there was something exciting going on with the way they're being taught. And the same thing that various groups that feel that are marginalized in the schools would come out to meetings to discuss that, as opposed to, please come to a meeting about LCAP where we will discuss goals, strategies, metrics, and district policies, blah, 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 blah. It just doesn't grab people. And that's the difference, I think, just in terms of the presentation today. We do have to comply with all those details in the paper, but this is absolutely what brings it alive. And I think it really comes down to very much with the work of Paulo Freire, who talked about literacy, and that literacy is not just learning to read and write, it's learning to act upon the world. And if we create and work with a generation in terms of creating this attitude, we've gone a lot further than we have before. So thank you very much.
I'd also like to thank the panel, well presented, and also like to thank the people who put it together, and this board. I'm new to the board, and most of the work was done before I got here. But I did hear some consistent themes throughout, and for me, the C in LCAP is highlighted in tonight's report. The C for me stands for community, stands for collaboration. It stands for working together, coming together, developing a plan that allows every child to be identified, every child to be seen as having value, every child to be loved and taught and to be successful. And the LCAP here is that effort to expand services to address the diverse needs of all students within this very large school district, 133,000 students, 227 schools. So we got students as well as the people who are servicing the students and teaching the students. So the plan is more than just something about students and identifying students because they are a target. It also is talking about our staff, our teachers, the folks who support our educational system, as well as our partners and parents out there. So I believe the plan addresses all of those groups in a very compassionate way, and in a way that will lead us down a pathway that will move us away from where we have been. As Trustee Barrera said, we really do need to get it right. And we need to end this cycle of misunderstanding, misrepresentation, of bigotry and of biases. And we need to begin that transition to a more compassionate system that addresses the individual needs of students in a way that allows them to grow and to expand. So, commendations around, well done, and I'm really thrilled to be a part of it and be able to be here to vote for it.
Okay. Well, I don't think we have any more comments, but again, thank you for your tremendous leadership, and we're really excited about these examples of bringing the LCAP to life. And and I'm sitting with trustees that are talking about compassion in the LCAP and justice and the work of Pablo Freire. And so, it's just, this, I don't know, this looks like a new day to me. And I think we had a second. Yeah, we did that. So now we're just going to vote. Go ahead.
Cliffhanger.
Thank you. So I'll close that hearing and open up another public hearing, which is H2, public hearing and adoption of the proposed 15-16 district budget and resolution to certify